Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. In a week in which the headline writers pulled out all the stops of hyperbole and mixed metaphor with metaphor to tell us that a new chapter was dawning or that a golden age was being born. Later in the programme, Saeb Erekat on Palestine after the Gaza incursion and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, all reflecting on the coming of President Obama too. Plus, is religion a force for good or evil? We have a debate. But first, of course, President Obama. Many are alive today who thought that they would never live to see a black president, and hopes are inevitably sky high. But can he deliver? Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is a man who should know. Congressman Jim Clyburn, the Democratic whip in the House of Representatives and the highest-ranking African-American in Congress. Congressman, it's a joy to have you with us. You were one of those people who thought that they would never see a black president, weren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I never thought I would live to see this day. I'm one of those people who started out back in the 60s believing in the dream as enunciated by Martin Luther King Jr. on that day back in August 1963. This day, Tuesday, validated that dream, and it vindicated those of us who bought into the dream. And I think it's a tremendous victory for democracies all over the world. So I'm calling that 3V Day, the 20th of January.
The 3 V's being vindication, validation, and victory. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's what I call it.
And it must have been an incredibly thrilling day for you, chosen by the Speaker of the House to lead the House delegation to the inaugural ceremony. That must have been a moment you will never forget.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very pleased with that. I was very surprised at it because it's usually given to the dean of the delegation, but when I was honored that way, I will always remember that. To have my children and grandchildren there in the audience, taking a day out of school to be a part of that, to share those experiences with 3 generations was just a bit much for me, and I was so pleased to have lived to see the day.
And the start has encouraged you, the first few days of business, Guantanamo and the other issues. Are you pleased with the way it's all begun? I guess you are.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I think that it's very clear that this is not a victory just for us as a country and for the national agenda, but this was a victory for our international relationships around the world. It re-engages us with the world community. And one of the things that we just have to do is to get back into the ideals of what made this country what it is. And Gitmo, as we call it, Guantanamo, is just a bad deal for our relationships. And so I'm so pleased to see him keep his promise in such a forceful way to help reconnect us to the world community with the kind of credibility that we need in order to carry out the negotiations.
And you know, obviously, you know President Obama well, obviously. Would you say that in personal terms, in his personality, in his character, in his stature, that he has the qualities of character that will grow in office?
Oh, absolutely, I think so. If you watched him as a candidate from that cold winter day in Springfield, Illinois, and watch how he developed going through the campaign in Iowa to have such a tremendous victory and to withstand a significant loss in New Hampshire, to come back and do what he did in South Carolina, everybody thought that he could not connect with the African-American community because he did not have the experiences. They didn't realize that his experiences as a community organizer in Southside Chicago just served him well throughout this campaign. And I believe he had the credibility that few people had to get to be head of the law review at the most prestigious law school in the country. And rather than to parlay that into wealth, he decided to go back to Chicago for $10,000 or $12,000 a year and work those streets. He, I believe, gave himself credibility that just could not be taken away from him in this campaign.
Congressman Clyburn, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you'll join us again in the course of this administration, and we wish you well. I gather you've got a stimulus meeting this afternoon.
No, in just a few moments, and thank you so much for having me on the show. David, you're one of my favorites.
Our thanks to Congressman Clyburn. President Obama's foreign policy priorities became clear this week when his new Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, appointed 2 new key diplomatic envoys. At a press conference hosted by the President, it was announced that Richard Holbrooke will be going to Pakistan and Afghanistan, and George Mitchell to the Middle East. Later in the program, we'll be talking to the Pakistani Foreign Minister about Holbrooke's appointment, among many things. But let's begin with the Middle East and indeed George Mitchell. I'm joined by senior Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat. Mr. Erekat, Saeb, thank you so much for joining us. President Obama said in his inaugural address that he was hoping to find a new way of communicating with the Muslim world and so on. And indeed, he reportedly made his first telephone call was in fact to your leader, Mahmoud Abbas. Do you feel that there is a new atmosphere, a new hope as a result of a new president?
Yes, I think it's significant that President Obama chose President Abbas to be the first president to speak to. And in the phone call, Sir David, he reiterated his commitment to pursuing the peace process, to achieve the 2-state solution, to achieve peace between Palestinians and Israelis. And he said something significant also, that he will not waste any time. He will work in a very expeditious fashion, and he informed the president that he will appoint a special envoy to the region to pursue the peace process, which we see as something encouraging. But we really hope that President Obama will shift the policy of the U.S. from the policy of what's possible to the policy of what's needed. What I mean by this, Sir David, is that since 1956, U.S. administrations came to Israel, saw what Israel can do and what Israel cannot do, and then they tailored their policy to be that of what's possible. What's needed today to President Obama is not to reinvent the wheel, not to eat the apple from the start, but to pursue the transformation of the vision of 2 states from a vision to a realistic political track. We have a peace process whose objective has been defined by ending the Israeli occupation, by establishing a Palestinian state next to the state of Israel. So we hope that President Obama will move in the direction of what's needed.
And have you heard also from the Secretary of State, from Hillary Clinton?
Yes, she placed the phone call to President Abbas, and she informed him that the president and her will announce the appointment of Senator Mitchell to be the special envoy. We all remember Senator Mitchell's experience in conflict resolution in Ireland and other places, and we remember him as the head of the investigation commission that led to the Mitchell report, which was the most important report with recommendations as how to proceed with solving the Arab-Israeli conflict.
So that's good news as far as you're concerned. It's a good choice.
I believe Senator Mitchell is a senator of stature and of wisdom and vast experience, and he doesn't need to be acquainted or educated about us. He knows in depth the situation in the Middle East. He knows the Israelis very well. He knows the Palestinians very well. He knows the Syrians, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudis. He knows the region very well. So he will not, he can begin immediately knowing us, and we know him very well also.
And while these things are being prepared and he's taking up his appointment and so on, do you think that the current ceasefire will hold?
That's a good question, Sir David. That's a good question, and I cross my fingers that this fragile announcement by Israel will hold, because I hope that the Egyptian efforts in working out a sustained ceasefire will work, because the next step, if this is maintained and sustained, what we call the tahdi'ah or the ceasefire, call it whatever you want, I think the next step of vital interest to us now is to begin the process of national reconciliation. We as Palestinians are going through the worst chapter in our history since 1967. Gaza separated from the West Bank. This division must end. And if we don't help ourselves as Palestinians, nobody else can. And I hope, as part of the Egyptian initiative to sustain the ceasefire, they have Article number 3 in that initiative, which called on all Palestinian factions to join under the Egyptian umbrella to move in the direction of forming a government of national consensus, a national unity government for all Palestinians, in order to carry out 4 things. Number 1 is to face the huge humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Number 2 is to lift the siege and open the passages and the crossings. Number 3 is to begin the process of reconstruction and rebuilding. And number 4, to set a date for the presidential legislative elections for the Palestinians, as agreed by all factions.
What would be the first step to getting a reconciliation between the Palestinian Authority, yourselves, and Hamas? I mean, is it a meeting? Is it an undertaking?
Yes. You recall, Sir David, that in November 9th, the Egyptians had scheduled a meeting for national reconciliation, and Hamas did not turn to Egypt at that time. They did not come. We hope now that the Egyptians, when they call upon all Palestinian factions in the next few days, that all will go. President Abbas, in his speech in the Kuwait summit 2 days ago, he extended his arms to all Palestinian factions to join under the Egyptian umbrella. I think if this devastation and human catastrophe that resulted from the Israeli attacks against Gaza will not unite us, I don't know what else will.
So do you think that, in fact, there can be peace in the Middle East during the 4 or possibly 8 years of President Obama? Is it possible?
Well, it's possible to have peace within the year 2009, Sir David. See, this is a conflict that we all know the details. All stones have been turned. We're not going to eat the apple from the start. We know that the roadmap specified the objective of the peace process as to end the Israeli occupation that began in 1967. We know that the United States' vision now is a vision of a 2-state Palestine to live side by side, Israel in peace and security. So what we need to do is make sure that we focus on the real issue, and I hope that President Obama will make sure that this Palestinian problem from all its aspects is solved once and for all. Because if this does not happen, and if the Israelis continue with the policies of settlements, fait accompli policies, dictation and walls and wars, we have to ask ourselves the question as to when the next war will be. Israeli policies of military solutions, attacks and so on have always led and will continue to lead in one direction, strengthening and widening the cycle of violence, counter-violence, bloodshed and extremism.
Thank you very much, Saeb. Thank you very much for joining us with your strong point of view. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much indeed.
The pleasure is mine, Sir David. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. In a minute, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, after this short break.